Hello and welcome to ODOT's Active Transportation Plan Development Application Overview and FAQs webinar. My name is Paula Hyman from the Ohio LTAP Center, and I'm going to be your technical support for today's webinar. Just a few housekeeping items. If you have questions throughout this presentation, please type them into the questions box. Our presenter will address your questions periodically throughout the presentation. This webinar is being recorded, and providing that the recording is successful, the YouTube link and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to all participants. I want to thank you in advance for your participation with that, and I will pass things off to Ms. Kate Harley, Safe Routes to School and Active Transportation Manager. Kate?
Hey there. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And I'll put my video on. All right, great. Thanks, Paula. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. I'm Kate Harley. I'm the Safe Routes to School and Active Transportation Manager at the Ohio Department of Transportation. Thanks so much for joining this informational webinar about our new application for Active Transportation Plan Development Assistance. All right, so over the next hour, I'm going to give some background about this technical assistance and our purpose with kind of developing this specific opportunity. I wanted to go over in detail exactly what assistance we're making available, go through some of the eligibility details, the application process itself, provide you with some information on what will impact our selection, and then finish out with a few related tools and resources. And throughout the webinar, I've pulled in some questions and answers that I've been getting over the last couple of weeks, as well as some of the questions that you all might have submitted as part of your registration link. So I'll try to cover a lot of the major FAQs, but definitely feel free to post questions in the question pod. And I will pause kind of every few slides or so to touch on some of those questions. If we don't get through all of them, or if there's a question that I'm not able to answer immediately, I'll definitely be assembling any additional questions and answers to include in our follow-up email, like Paula said. All right, so just to give you a little bit of background, last year ODOT completed the state's first statewide bicycle and pedestrian plan, outlining the state's vision for walking and biking in the future and identifying a set of 6 goal areas tied to making this vision a reality. So our vision is that walking and biking in Ohio will be a safe, convenient, and accessible transportation option for everyone. And then the 6 goals that have been identified are on the right-hand side of the screen, really focused on safety, equity, connectivity, livability, network utilization, and preservation. And Walk.Bike.Ohio also outlines the kind of major roles and responsibilities of key stakeholders in advancing these goals. And then it specifically outlines strategies that ODOT will be focused on over the next 5 years. And so I was just going to talk quickly about a couple of these relevant strategies that kind of relate to our planning assistance opportunity. So one of these strategies relates to ensuring that active transportation is embedded into planning frameworks, design, implementation, and other guidance. Specifically, we took the tact of developing a new guide outlining a recommended approach for developing standalone active transportation plans. So that's what you see on the right-hand side of the screen is this new guide that we published last year, I think June of 2021, with a recommended approach to developing standalone active transportation plans. So we heard that it was really important to provide local and regional partners with more resources and tools to better understand and document the unique needs of people walking and biking, and to be able to develop recommendations to meet those needs. So this guide and the accompanying template, which is the second image, can be utilized by any local government, any regional planning organization, or any other planning partners to document existing conditions, engage your community, and identify projects that will advance safe, convenient, and accessible transportation options. The second, the other relevant strategy that relates to providing communities with assistance. So this is where we really get into the technical assistance side, and Walk.Bike.Ohio generally outlines a strategy to provide communities with assistance in developing active transportation plans. There's really a variety of ways in which we provide technical assistance. I'll talk a little bit later about our Active Transportation Academy. And for this competitive application, we took the tact of focusing this assistance on local governments to develop standalone active transportation plans made up of projects that will be on the locally owned and maintained transportation network of that applicant. So a very prescriptive opportunity, again, focused on local governments, recommending projects that will be on the system that they maintain, and ultimately developing this standalone bicycle and pedestrian plan. So while the guide and the template that I mentioned on the last slide can really be used by a variety of partners to meet a variety of your needs, whether it's a local plan, a regional plan, finding something that works for you depending on resources that you have available. This specific technical assistance opportunity is focused on local governments individually or in partnership with another jurisdiction, which I'll touch on a little bit more later. And while we're offering consultant assistance to local governments, the funding that we do have available is about $450,000 for this opportunity in 2022, and we'll be able to provide a similar level of opportunity again in 2023. Okay, so again, the purpose of this competitive application is to select and support local governments with the development of a standalone active transportation plan that is really going to impact Ohio's 6 active transportation goals. So we're looking at equity, ensuring that the system accommodates users of all ages, abilities, and incomes. We're looking at network utilization, so increasing walking and biking usage, network connectivity, promoting comfortable and continuous bicycle and pedestrian facilities that connect people to destinations, safety, reducing bicycle and pedestrian injury and fatalities, livability, improving the quality of life of all Ohioans, and then finally preservation, ensuring that critical existing infrastructure is in a state of good repair. So these are really the goals that we are looking to advance by providing this assistance out to communities. Like I mentioned, consultant assistance is available, and just at a high level, wanted to mention that this assistance will include an evaluation of existing conditions for walking and biking. It'll include recommendations for the development of an active transportation network, for specific infrastructure projects, as well as for programs and policies that are relevant to the specific roadway authority. It'll include a list of prioritized infrastructure projects that include routes and recommended facility types. This assistance will include stakeholder engagement and public engagement, and it will also include a process for implementation, monitoring, and reporting. And I just wanted to emphasize one more time, because it's really important and it's come up a lot with some of the conversations I've had over the last couple weeks, is that just wanted to emphasize that the actual project recommendations that will be outlined in these plans will only be projects on the transportation network that the local applicant has the maintenance authority for. This does not mean that these plans will be developed in a vacuum. They will absolutely, understand connections, regional connections, and bicycle and pedestrian generators and things outside of just that locally maintained transportation network. But in the plan, the projects that are included will only be on that system. We've outlined a 10-month planning process that we expect would kick off later this year, likely around August, and be completed roughly within 10 months ahead of July 1st, 2023. And this visual comes from our active transportation plan development guide, and it just sort of outlines this general 10-month strategy and how we would work our way through this planning process. And just in general, if you haven't gotten familiar with the ODOT AT Plan Development Guide, I would definitely take a look at it. This consultant assistance is going to, largely follow the steps outlined in this guide, and the final planning product will utilize the template as a starting point. And so, getting familiar with that guide is going to be really helpful to understand if this is a good fit for your community and, what to kind of expect. By the time you kick this off, we'll have, already kind of made it through this introductory stuff, and we would have already defined the scope. And I'm going to talk next about the scope of services Word document that we've developed as well. So this is another really key resource for your community as you're talking about this potential opportunity and if it's a good fit for what you're looking to do, what your goals are. If this sort of planning product is something that you think is going to be useful to you, and something that you can lead implementation on. So we developed this pretty specific scope of work to give you a clear understanding of what this specific technical assistance opportunity will look like, what it will entail. And in addition, we also wanted to outline what your role is as the local lead, as well as the tasks that the consultant will be delivering as well. I'm going to talk just kind of briefly through each of these 7 main tasks, but definitely encourage you to look at this yourselves, talk about the points at which you would be providing leadership or support in this planning process. And just in general, having a good understanding of what is in this scope of work is going to help you answer questions within the application. One of the questions asks how much time, the local lead is going to dedicate to this planning process. And the answer to that is really made up of the amount of time you think it will take to complete some of these tasks that have been outlined in the scope of work, depending on your community, depending on your roadway network, depending on your stakeholder and public engagement. But in general, this is a high level of consultant assistance. This consultant will be leading you through the development of an active transportation plan, and local leads are expected to provide leadership, direction, and support throughout the 10-month process. Okay, so just a couple quick notes, document and data assets review. This task is really just dedicated to assembling data, reviewing existing plans, pulling together documents and data sets that might impact some of your data collection needs and inform plan development. Data collection and preparation. This task really involves the collection, consolidation, and organization of all of the data sets that are necessary to perform a pretty specific set of analyses, which I'll talk about next. All of this data will be used throughout the planning process to populate your existing conditions section, to inform your action plan and priority projects. And just in general, we will at a minimum be including these 7 data sets. So we'll be including bike and ped crash data. We will be including asset and asset inventory. So looking at where bicycle and pedestrian facilities are. We'll be looking at our roadway inventory, bicycle and pedestrian activity metrics, motorized volume data, information on land use, as well as points of interest. So these are sort of the minimum data sets that we'll be looking to include so that we're able to conduct a specific set of analyses. And I will mention, you know, as you're looking at the AT Plan Development Guide, so kind of this bigger resource on outlining approaches for developing standalone active transportation plans, it includes a menu of options for communities to identify different approaches to understanding existing conditions. We have selected those specifically for this opportunity. So we're pulling items from that guide, and we've outlined really a specific set of analyses that we would plan to conduct as part of this technical assistance opportunity. And I'll pause for questions in just a few more slides. So in this assistance, you know, our goal with kind of identifying these analyses specifically is just to align the plan's recommendations with our statewide goals and with our funding priorities as well. So for example, you know, including a systemic safety analysis was particularly important to us because we've been really focused on systemic safety within our highway safety improvement program, for example. So being able to, you know, understand what that might look like across your network, how you might be able to apply countermeasures across your system in this kind of systemic approach will be a great thing to be able to document in this kind of plan and help tie us more specifically with funding opportunities. Okay, we also have a task related to stakeholder engagement. So again, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of engagement that we are scoping into this opportunity. So we've looked to include 3, you know, major steering committee workshops and 2 major public workshops. We've also scoped in material development for further engagement that the local lead would help to execute. So developing websites and interactive maps where you're able to more easily collect information and feedback or other presentation materials that you might need for different types of community events that work for your community. And then project list and action plan. So again, we'll be following this sort of process for developing project recommendations that's outlined in our AT Plan Development Guide. You know, defining our network, determining facilities, developing projects. So you'll end up with a recommended project list as well as an action plan that is more related to non-infrastructure things. And we will look to organize that sort of similar to how we've organized our action plan in Walk.Bike.Ohio. A little bit of flexibility here, but in general, these are the ways in which we've organized the strategies within Walk.Bike.Ohio under planning and guidance, education and promotion, implementation, data, and collaboration. And there'll also be a process for project prioritization, which includes both quantitative analysis that connects projects to our goal areas, as well as community feedback and priorities as well. And then the last major task is the plan development itself. So we're anticipating that the final plan will roughly follow this 7-chapter outline when it's all complete. Okay, so a couple questions are coming in the chat. They're related a little bit to eligibility, so I'll touch on that first. In terms of eligible applicants, we're looking to support plans for cities, villages, townships, and counties. We're also allowing for two of multi-jurisdictional applications from more than one of the eligible applicants. And the only other nuance to that is a park district cannot be a solo applicant, but they can be part of a joint application. And then in terms of requirements from those applicants, we require that a local lead is identified from the applicant agency and that they specifically dedicate staff time to the plan development process. Couple FAQs here. So these have just come in over the last couple weeks. Question about, can a local bike association lead this planning effort? No, a local lead would have to be identified. The local lead would have to be from one of those eligible entities. And the point person, the local lead, would have to be a staff person from that local government. However, this might be a really important partner in your community, and they might be really involved in, supporting the local lead in completing some of the tasks outlined in the scope of work. So it's not to say that this wouldn't potentially be a key stakeholder, a key partner in your plan, but they can't be the applicant, and they can't be identified as the local lead. And you can there's definitely place within the application to talk about those key stakeholders that are going to be involved on more of like a day-to-day aspect of the plan. And for your community, that might be somebody from a local, bike association. Another question that I've gotten a couple of times is, we've allowed for more than one community to apply in a joint application. So I've gotten the question, how many communities can apply? Where are you kind of drawing the line? 2 communities, 3, 4, like what does that look like? So just want to say, keep in mind that this is not meant to serve as a regional planning opportunity. And so the ability to jointly apply is really there to allow jurisdictions who feel like in order to create a completed and connected bike and ped network, really need to work with another jurisdiction. So we see this, sometimes with cities and certain townships, that their transportation network is just so interconnected and sometimes even surround each other. So in those types of instances where your network is just so intertwined with somebody else's network, we do want to provide an opportunity for 2 jurisdictions to apply together so that projects can include both of those transportation systems. So that's sort of the purpose of allowing multi-jurisdictions to apply. The other sort of specific reason we wanted to allow multi-jurisdictions to apply is from a trail perspective. If, for example, if a county wanted to apply for this planning assistance, the projects would be on the county roadway system. And if you have a parks district that really is, plays the lead role in building and maintaining trails in your county, then it would make sense to for those 2 people to really be joint applicants if you wanted your plan to include both on and off-road bicycle and pedestrian facilities. All right, I'm going to check some of the questions that are coming in. Are school districts eligible to create walking and biking paths on their campus? Good question. So the school district could not be the applicant for this opportunity. If you were really specifically focused on school connectivity, you might actually think about going through some of the planning assistance available through our Safe Routes to School program. But if schools are a key stakeholder in your community and are going to be potentially serving a big role, that's absolutely possible. There might be projects on school property that the school would be heavily involved in, but in general, the school districts are not going to be eligible as an applicant. How does the provision of a local match factor into the decision process? So there is no local match requirement other than the in-kind staff time of the local lead. So no local matches required in funding. Wondering if a letter, okay, I think I answered this later. Okay. Okay, some good questions coming in, and I'm going to come back to them. Okay, couple FAQs on eligibility, kind of what's eligible. So I've gotten a couple questions. My community's developed a bicycle and pedestrian plan at some point in the past. We want to update it. Would we be eligible for this opportunity? Yes, you can still apply even if you have developed some similar plan in the past. For those of you who do have past plans, this will be used as a part of, that sort of document collection part of the process to look at past plans, past priorities, any findings that have been included within those plans. If you're truly looking to update your old plan, so you have a plan and you really just want to update it and make note of what's been done and sort of refine your priorities, this specific technical assistance opportunity may not be the perfect fit, just because the plan that you're developing is going to be based on this very specific scope of work. It may not really reflect so much an update to your plan, but you are eligible to apply. And yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. Another question I've gotten, I'm interested to hear if rural communities that are developing rail to trails, mostly for recreational purposes, could be a strong applicant for this assistance. What would a strong proposal for a rail trail network look like? The short answer to that is no. Focusing only on trail connections that would mostly serve recreational purposes would not be a competitive application. And that's largely because of the goals that we're seeking to advance with this assistance. So trails are absolutely a bike facility that can and would likely be included to some extent within these plans, as long as the applicant would serve as the maintenance authority. But again, we're only going to outline projects in these plans that the applicant would be the project sponsor. If you do have an interest in advancing trail connections in your community, I would just make sure that whoever would manage those trails would be a partner in this application. And we know, trails can certainly serve a variety of purposes for transportation and recreation. And again, applications will largely be judged on their ability to demonstrate that this plan is going to help advance active transportation options and those 6 goals. Question about, if the scope of work can be edited. Not largely. There could be some minor edits that are included, and for the local communities that we select, we would have like a final scoping call as before we kicked off the work. So there would be an opportunity for us to confirm some of the data sets that are available, or any specific focuses you have. So there might be some really small tweaks here or there, just depending on your community, what you have available or not, that would impact kind of the scope that we're outlining for our consultants. And then I already touched on the local match. There's no local match requirement. I'm getting a couple questions related to consultants. So we will be using task order consultants that ODOT has on staff, that we have on task order. So right now that would largely be with Tool Design Group, and potentially additional consultants, just depending on how many plans need to be completed, just depending on consultant authority. So some of them will be developed by our current consultant team from Tool Design Group. Okay, quick information on the application process, and then I'll take more of these FAQs. So the application is an online form stack. Here is the link to all of this information. When you're ready to check out the actual application, you'll click on this launch button. It's this like green button on the right. That'll take you to the application. Down below, a little bit further down the page on the right, there's a section called Application Tools and Resources. This is where you'll find a couple really important documents, including the scope of services and the MOU that you will ultimately sign before we get started on the work. A few just quick tips related to the application. And again, this is due April 22nd. This is just a quick screenshot of what the application looks like once you get there. You do have the opportunity to save this application. However, don't upload any attachments until you're ready to submit, because the system will not save your attachments. There's only a handful of attachments. Largely, they're letters of support, project examples, and there's an optional place for you to provide other like past relevant planning documents that you think would be important for us to know about. All right, a few more FAQs. Will a letter of support from the local lead in the municipality suffice, or will we have to submit to council before applying? Because there's no transfer of money, we don't need legislation to be passed in this case. However, we need your municipality to sign a letter of support to demonstrate that you're on board and you're committing to the items outlined in the scope of services, and that that you're comfortable doing that. So no, council signed legislation is needed. Okay, a specific question came up about the part of the application that asks for an example of a recent bicycle or pedestrian related project. So I've been asked, is this infrastructure? Is this something that's been constructed, or is it something that's planned? So this is asking for a completed, constructed project example. And then I've also been getting variations of this question, which is, is this technical assistance offering a very specific plan that's going to make me newly eligible for some specific funding? No, not necessarily. There's not many funding programs that require a bicycle and pedestrian plan be developed in order to apply, but in general, we think that there's lots of value in understanding your top priorities, being able to describe why projects are critical, why they will have a big impact on your community. So we think this is generally helpful in terms of leveraging funds, whether that's funding through ODOT programs, whether that's funding through regional planning organization, whether that's trying to get trail funding through ODNR, or even if you're seeking to leverage a larger federal discretionary funding program in general. So, you know, at ODOT specifically, the Safe Routes to School program is actually the only program that specifically asks for projects to be identified within a planning document. So these plans have to engage school stakeholders. They have to be comprehensive, and that they include both infrastructure and non-infrastructure, and they have to be updated within 5 years. But like I said earlier, the scope of services that we've outlined for this was really just aiming to align with our statewide goals and funding priorities, but it's not the only approach for developing an active transportation plan. Our guide outlines, again, a menu of options that you can use at different scales, you know, depending on differing available resources, to, you know, develop a plan that's going to help you initiate good projects. So this isn't the only way to do it, but we think that this is going to be a really great way to help advance our priorities. Okay, and then just wanted to touch on, you know, as we review and select local governments for this assistance, these are really the 4 main things we're looking at. We're looking to see that there is a strong level of readiness to both plan and implement bicycle and pedestrian improvements. So that's a huge part of this, you know, making sure that the community is ready to go, you know, ready to dedicate time to this planning process and is interested and eager to implement projects on, you know, when that's completed. The other really major thing we're looking at is the ability to improve / impact statewide active transportation goals. So I've shared those a couple of times in this presentation. Those are reiterated a lot on the application website, and that's because it's a really important part of this application. We, you know, want you to talk specifically about these goals. We want you to discuss these goals as you present information in your application, as you talk about challenges and opportunities, as you know, share any insights, as you share qualitative or quantitative information, whatever you're including in your application. We, you know, want you to be telling the story of how helping your community develop this plan is going to move the needle on safety, connectivity, equity, livability, network utilization, and preservation. So that's a huge part of how we'll be reviewing these applications. We're also looking for strong local commitment and leadership to plan or in plan development and in implementation. So these plans are developed and will be owned by the local jurisdiction. There will be your plans to own and implement. So we're looking for that strong leadership. And then finally, we want to make sure this is a good fit. So we're offering a pretty prescriptive technical assistance opportunity. We want to make sure that you know, you understand what this final planning product is going to be, that it's a good fit for you in advancing your community objectives as well. That was the bulk of my presentation, so I'm going to go back over here to the FAQs. We have several coming in. Feel free to continue to populate these because we still have about 20 minutes left. Okay. Bear with me as I read these and answer them at the same time. Okay, a question came in. Can we identify someone as the lead? Can we identify someone as the lead with being paid through our regional planning commission? So we actually do require a letter of support from your relevant regional planning commission, and definitely, could see them being a major stakeholder involved in this plan. That would make a lot of sense for them to be represented on your steering committee and play a really large role. The local lead would have to come from a local jurisdiction, though. So I'll just flash that back onto the screen. Whoever is that roadway owner, city, village, township, county, or combination, it would have to be somebody identified from one of those local governments. But I do think, depending on your community and your partners, the effort put into this plan could certainly be spread amongst a couple of key people. So, if your county is going to be the lead and you've identified someone in the county who's going to be the point person, represent the county, make sure that they're pulling in the right partners. You might have really a lot of support from your local MPO potentially, or from another agency who's really interested in helping with this process. So that person might play a really big leadership role in your community. Okay, we have some sidewalks to nowhere because homeowner lots are not developed between existing homes and would like to connect them. Would this be allowable? Yeah, so in communities that have, disconnected or fragmented sidewalk networks, that would certainly be something that we would be looking to address and prioritize within the development of this plan. I will say that, the goal of this plan is to help identify a bicycle and pedestrian network, a connected network in your community. So, that issue would be a part of that plan and a part of, making a more connected network. But the projects would go beyond that as well, to envision kind of a future state to better connect your community for walking and biking. Okay. I'm getting a couple questions that are a little bit more infrastructure specific, like project funding specific. So just to be clear, the consultant assistance that's available is only for planning activities. So the project implementation would be led by the local government. What is included as part of the scope is a project prioritization process and the ability to select up to 3 projects for like a more in-depth kind of project cut sheet. So this is where we could provide just some slightly more specific project details, maybe a rendering, just like a planning level cost estimate, things that are going to help you launch into implementation, but what we're discussing today does not include any project implementation funding. A couple of questions have come in related to how many communities you anticipate will receive the award. I believe I listed an estimate online of potentially 4 to 7 local governments. We have $450,000 available for this year, which I think could translate into 4 to 7 of these plans depending on the applicant, depending on kind of the size of the community and their transportation network. But that's just sort of an educated guess. Can I use this plan to apply for Safe Routes to School funding? Yes, and for those of you who are Safe Routes to School might be a good fit for you. You know, if your schools, if you see, you know, a lot of your students within 2 miles of schools, and that might be a focus for you moving forward, we would scope in some of the specific school related information that you would need to be eligible for Safe Routes to School. So you can use an active transportation plan to become eligible for Safe Routes to School as long as you have some school stakeholder engagement, and you're able to talk a little bit about how kids are currently getting to school, you know, what percent live within 2 miles, what are their, you know, common barriers, things like that. This plan would include infrastructure and non-infrastructure recommendations, so it would check that box. So yes, it's possible that it could, and if that's something that you are interested in doing, we would make sure to include those elements. Is the AT plan different from a Safe Routes to School travel plan? Would an AT plan count as a Safe Routes to School plan? Yes, I think I just answered that. The difference between an AT plan and a school travel plan is the school travel plan is entirely focused on connecting students to school. So it's very, very focused on the student population. It's very focused on identifying projects along routes that children would take to school. And it's also focused on recommending facilities that'll be comfortable for that student population. So there's tons of similarities, but it's a slightly more focused, plan on slightly more focused goals. And then projects that are eligible to come to ODOT Safe Routes to School program would, if they came through an AT plan, obviously those projects would still have to demonstrate that they would connect kids to school. So it's not that every project in an AT plan would be eligible for ODOT Safe Routes to School program, but it's entirely possible that your AT plan would be outlining projects that are going to support students in getting to school and would be good, potentially good projects for the Safe Routes to School program. I'm getting a couple questions related to funding. So is there a cap on funding amount? So some of this might just depend on the applications that come in. I think in general, we wouldn't be spending more than about $100,000 on any one plan. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking. I think it might be. So just to give you kind of a sense of the amount of money potentially that might be behind some of these plans, I think it's unlikely that we would provide more than $100,000 on any one planning, on any one plan. Oh, good question. Would applications be put in line for the funding for 2023 if not funded this year? That's a good question. I might have to loop back on that one. I think there's a couple ways forward. And before we wrap up, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the planning resources available through our AT Academy. But I'll have to get back to you about that. Is there a Safe Routes to Parks program too? ODOT does not have a Safe Routes to Parks program, but we do have a transportation alternatives program, which includes bicycle and pedestrian projects, trail projects, streetscaping, complete streets projects. And so it's certainly possible for projects to connect to parks available through TAP. Must a community already have pedestrian infrastructure or complete streets policies in place to be eligible? Good question. A complete streets policy is not required in order to be eligible. Oh, okay, a follow-up question came in about cost. Okay, so a question came in, do we need to identify a cost proposal for the AT plan? No. So you will not need to submit a cost. Yeah, there is no budget or cost that you would be including within your application. Okay, I think that was most of them. I'm just going to do another quick check. Okay. So a couple final slides. If you have more questions, keep populating them. We have just under 10 minutes left. So just in terms of key tools and resources, things that are out there right now related to developing a standalone active transportation plan. I said it before, I'll say it again. We just published a new guide. Check it out. There's something for everyone in that guide in terms of whether you want to develop a local bike ped plan, a regional bicycle pedestrian plan. If you want to do a really high effort, high resource intensive plan, or something that's lower effort, lower resource intensive plan, there's a lot of options for developing a plan. And this template is available. It's a Word document, so you can download it. You can change it to be whatever you want it to be. It has language in there that you can keep or change or delete. It's really just a place for you to start. And to sort of make it easier to work your way through the development of a plan, populate it with your own information. So this is all available online. I haven't talked a lot about the appendices document, but there's also a lot of good information in the appendices that goes along with our AT plan development guide. There's like information on just language and how to write a plan. There's information on if you are collecting asset information. So if as part of your plan, you're developing a sidewalk inventory or something like that, we provide some recommended data schemas for your community. And as part of this technical assistance opportunity, we will be doing some asset collection, and we will be utilizing and collecting data in that standard format. The other thing that we have available is the Active Transportation Academy. So we specifically have a personalized community workshop available called Creating an Active Transportation Plan. It's personalized, which means we actually work with your community before, developing this 4-hour workshop to sort of see where you're at, what you're looking for. This is a great way to convene stakeholders to understand, what all is included in this process, kind of get you off to the right start. help you figure out who's going to do what and where you might need to prioritize your time and energy. And kind of depending on where you're at, you might want to have a workshop to help you get started. You might want to have a workshop in the middle to help you kind of keep momentum you know, discuss key findings and turn those into actual project recommendations. So you can really use this workshop in a variety of ways. The other workshop we have is actually conducting a walk audit. So if you are going to lead your own plan development process, but you want ODOT to help you with lead a specific walk audit and develop findings, you know, from that walk audit, that is something that we offer as well. In order to be eligible for these workshops, you do have to take our Active Transportation Basics e-learning. So this is available through LTAP's e-learning system. We've converted a lot of our trainings to e-learning over the past couple years during the pandemic, so that people just have this like self-paced place they can go to for training. And so if you're interested in doing a planning workshop, just make sure you take this sort of basics prerequisite. There's also a workshop for, for creating a school travel plan. So if what you're really interested in is a more school specific plan, we also have a personalized workshop to get you started or help you along with developing one of those. And if you were interested, we have a Safe Routes to School Basics course that would be your prerequisite. Let's see, a couple more links or a couple more questions coming in, I think. Can you publish some of the responses? Yes. Yeah, so I'll save down these questions and publish responses. Do we score better in applying for the various construction grants if we have an AT plan in place through your program? So like I mentioned, there's really not a lot of requirements to have a plan in place in order to be eligible to apply for projects. So if you have some priority projects in mind that you're seeking to advance, it's possible, you know, to get project funding for those projects. But we see a lot of value in helping communities develop standalone plans. We think that they will help set up communities for leveraging outside funding in the future. The only funding program through ODOT that specifically requires projects identified in the plan is Safe Routes to School. I can't really speak as much for like some of the MPO funding requirements I'm not as familiar with, but this is not going to specifically make you eligible for money for construction. Is a hard copy of the guide available? Not at this time. It is available online, but if there is a need for a hard copy, we could consider potentially printing and mailing that to you if that would be helpful. So let me know if that's something that you might need. Last call for questions. We have just 2 minutes left. The current screen is just a link to the AT Academy. If you are potentially interested in that, you know, if you apply and we aren't able to select your community, potentially this might be a good opportunity for you to take advantage of. Okay. Well, thanks for joining. I will hang on here for another moment or two to see if there's any other questions, but if not, look out for our follow-up email where we will have a recording and several other questions and answers available. So thanks for joining. Hope I was able to answer your questions. Please feel free to contact me if not. This webinar was not supposed to take the place of just contacting me if you do have questions. So I'm absolutely happy to talk with you about what you're thinking, if this is a good fit for you, and sort of what your needs are. So feel free to reach out to me if you have questions.